The low, guttural grind of the winch was the only sound cutting through the damp morning air. Metal cable, thick as my wrist, groaned under the strain, pulling the gleaming white bow of the 35-foot Formula speedboat up onto the flatbed of the repo truck. Its hull, usually slicing through lake water, looked absurd and vulnerable out here on the asphalt of Chad's own driveway. "You can't do this! Do you know who I am? This is illegal." His voice was a shrill crack, nothing like the smooth, confident baritone he used at dinner parties. I watched from the driver's seat of my F-150, parked across the street under the shade of an old oak. The engine was off, my window down. I wanted to hear everything. The coffee in my thermos was still hot, the steam fogging a small circle on the windshield that I'd wipe clear every few seconds. The two court officers, men with the weary patience of those who've seen this scene 1,000 times, didn't even look at him. One guided the winch, his hand movements small and precise. The other stood near the truck's cab, a clipboard in his hand, the official paperwork that made this all so beautifully, perfectly legal. Chad was in his slippers and a silk bathrobe, his hair a mess. He looked small. He kept pacing, running a hand through his hair, then pointing a trembling finger at the officers. "I'm calling my lawyer. You're going to be so sorry you did this. This is harassment." The lead officer, a guy with a graying mustache and a build that said he didn't skip the gym, finally turned. He didn't yell. His voice was calm, flat, devoid of all emotion. It was the voice of the law itself. "Sir, step back. You've been served the judgment. The lien is valid. This is a lawful seizure. Interfere, and you'll be arrested." The red and blue lights from the sheriff's deputy's car parked a few feet away pulsed rhythmically, painting Chad's furious, panicked face in flashes of color. The smell of diesel exhaust from the tow truck mixed with the dewy scent of freshly cut grass from the mansion next door. My heart wasn't racing. My palms weren't sweaty. I just watched. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Black. No sugar. 2 days. It had only been 2 days since he stood in his own kitchen, that same face twisted into a smug sneer instead of panicked rage, and said those words to me. The words that sealed all of this. "We don't owe you a dime." He'd said it so casually, so sure of himself, so utterly convinced that his charm and his bluster were a force field against consequence. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It misted in the cool morning air. The boat was almost fully on the flatbed now. A trophy, his biggest symbol of making it, of being the alpha male he so desperately wanted everyone to see. And it was being hauled away in the most public, humiliating way possible. His neighbors were probably watching from behind their blinds, sipping their own coffee, getting an unexpected morning show. I remember the feel of his handshake 3 years ago. Firm, confident, a little damp. The look in his eyes full of ambition and what I mistook for integrity. I believed him. I trusted him. I bet my house on him. My peace. My future. And all it took was one email, forgotten in an old inbox. One piece of paper. And 2 days. The lead officer secured the final strap over the boat's hull, gave it a firm tug, and nodded to his partner. The winch motor died, and the sudden silence was deafening. Chad just stood there, in the middle of his sprawling driveway, in his ridiculous robe, watching his prized possession disappear. The look on his face wasn't just anger. It was the look of a man whose entire identity was being driven away on a truck. The tow truck driver gave a short, sharp blast of his air horn, pulled slowly away from the curb, and turned down the tree-lined street. The sheriff's deputy followed, lights still spinning, a silent escort for justice. Chad didn't move. He just stood there, a statue of defeat. I started my truck. The engine rumbled to life, a quiet, powerful sound. I took one last look at him, put the truck in drive, and pulled away. He never even saw me. And that was the most satisfying part of all. You're probably wondering how a handshake deal between family, a promise made on a back porch over a beer, led to this. How a man's own arrogance became the anchor that sank his perfect life. This wasn't some random act of karma. This was a plan, a calculated, patient, and perfectly legal revenge. And it started the moment he looked me in the eye and told me I meant nothing. Stick around. I'm about to tell you the whole story, and trust me, it's worth it. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying these tales of justice served, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. You won't want to miss how this all unfolds. The memory hits me like a wave of warm air. A complete 180 from the cold morning on Chad Street. 3 years back. Late summer. The golden hour light was so thick you could almost taste it, pouring over my back deck like honey. The smell. God, the smell. Charcoal from the grill. The rich, savory scent of the ribs I was slow cooking. And the sweet, tangy hint of my wife's homemade barbecue sauce. The cicadas were buzzing in the old oak trees, a steady, lazy soundtrack. You could feel the heat of the day starting to loosen its grip. That was the night I first met Chad. My daughter, Sarah, her face lit up like I hadn't seen in years, was practically vibrating. "Dad, you're gonna love him. He's different." I gave the ribs a flip. "Different, good, or different? I'm joining a band and moving to Portland. Good?" She swatted my arm, laughing. "Good difference. He's driven. He has a 5-year plan." "A real one?" I nodded, wiping my hands on my apron. All right, I'll be on my best behavior." Then he was there, walking through the side gate. He wasn't what I expected. He was clean-cut, wore a crisp polo shirt, jeans that looked new, and a pair of boat shoes. No tattoos, no piercings. He carried himself with a calm assurance that was impressive. I'll give him that. "Mr. Thompson?" "Sir, it's an honor. Sarah talks about you all the time." His handshake was firm. Solid. A little too long, but not in a creepy way. In a, "I want you to feel my confidence" way. His smile was perfect. White. "Please, call me Rob." Everyone does. "Rob, got it." He held up a 6-pack of local craft beer. "I didn't know what you liked, so I brought an assortment. A little adventure." Smooth. I had to admit it. Smooth. The evening unfolded like a perfect movie scene. My wife, Carol, was charmed instantly. He helped her carry dishes out without being asked. He complimented her potato salad. Asked for the recipe even. He talked to me about my HVAC business with a genuine, intelligent curiosity. "You built that from the ground up, sir? That's incredible." That kind of hands-on brick-and-mortar success is the backbone of this country. You don't see that kind of work ethic anymore. He knew all the right things to say. The sun dipped lower, painting everything in oranges and purples. We moved to the Adirondack chairs as the fireflies started to blink in the yard. That's when he started talking about his big idea. "It's not a gamble, sir, Rob. It's a calculated investment. This strip mall out near the new subdivision, the developer is a friend of mine. He's giving me first dibs on a prime unit. Anchor location. I've got the business plan right here." He tapped his temple. "High-end fitness center. The area is starving for one." He painted a picture so vivid you could almost hear the clanging of weights. Young families, dual incomes, disposable cash, and a desire to look good. It made sense. It sounded smart. I took a long pull from the beer he'd brought. It was good. "It sounds solid, Chad. Really. But commercial real estate? That's a big nut to crack. Banks can be tough." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his expression turning deadly serious. The flickering citronella candle cast shadows on his face. "That's the thing, Rob. The bank is ready to give me the mortgage for the business itself. Operational costs, equipment, payroll. But the down payment for the lease, that's the hurdle. It's a one-time shot. If I don't secure that space next week, it's gone, and this opportunity vanishes." He let that hang in the air. The buzz of the cicadas seemed to get louder. Sarah was looking at him like he'd just recited poetry. "How much of a hurdle are we talking?" The question was out of my mouth before I could stop it. Carol shot me a look. The "don't get involved" look, but I was already hooked. 150,000. He said it like it was a round of drinks. Not a flicker of doubt. "I've got 20 of my own saved. I just need a partner for the rest. It's a loan. A short-term one. I'll have it back to you with interest within 18 months. Tops. The cash flow projections are insane." I stared into my beer bottle. $150,000. It was almost exactly the equity I had sitting in my house. The house I'd paid off over 30 years of fixing furnaces in blizzards and cleaning air conditioners in 100-degree attics. That's a lot of trust to ask for, Chad. My voice was quiet. He didn't miss a beat. I know it is, and I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe in this with every fiber of my being. This isn't just a loan, sir. It's a partnership. You're not just helping me, you're investing in your daughter's future. Our future. I want to give Sarah the life she deserves. A stable life. A secure life. He looked over at Sarah, and the look they shared, it felt real. It felt like love and ambition all wrapped together. It was a powerful cocktail. I felt Carol's hand on my arm, a gentle squeeze of caution. But all I could see was my little girl, happy, and this sharp, ambitious young man who wanted to build a future for her, a future I could help provide. I stood up. He stood up with me. The cicadas chirped. The smell of the night-blooming jasmine by the fence was overwhelming. "You're a good man, Chad," I said, my voice a little thick. "You love my daughter. You've got a good head on your shoulders." I stuck out my hand. His grip was just as firm as the first time, maybe firmer. "You have my word, Rob. This is the best decision you'll ever make. I will not let you down. Family helps family." "Family helps family," I echoed. We shook on it. A handshake under the stars. A promise. I felt good. I felt like a patriarch, a wise man, setting the next generation on their path. I believed him. I believed in him. I let go of his hand, completely unaware I had just signed over my retirement, my peace of mind, and my sense of security. I just bet everything on a smile and a perfect handshake. The biggest mistake of my life started with what felt like its best intention. 18 months came and went. The air changed. The seasons turned. But the money didn't come back. The first few months, it was radio silence. Then, the excuses started. They always came with a new toy. I remember calling him, the phone pressed to my ear, the receiver slick in my hand. I was in my office at the shop, the smell of metal and refrigerant hanging in the air. The invoice for a new compressor was sitting on my desk, a reminder of what real work looked like. "Chad, it's Rob, just touching base. How's things at the fitness center?" A pause on the other end. I could hear the faint sound of wind, like he was driving with the top down. "Rob, hey, things are great, just great. We're in a growth phase. You know what that's like, plowing every cent back into the business. Marketing, you know. It's a marathon, not a sprint." "Right, a marathon." I cleared my throat. "So the repayment plan we talked about?" "Absolutely, locked in my memory. Look, the returns are going to be even bigger because of this push. It's going to be worth the wait, I promise. Hey, gotta go, merging onto the highway. Talk soon." Click. The next Sunday, at a family dinner, he pulled up in a brand new BMW 7 Series. Metallic silver. It smelled like a new car, that sterile, expensive scent of leased luxury. He made a big show of handing Sarah out of the passenger seat. "Upgraded the ride," he said, jingling the keys. "Had to. Image is everything in my business. Clients see you in a beater. They think you're a beat." I just nodded, the meatloaf on my plate turning to cardboard. "I bet that comes with a pretty image-sized payment." He waved a dismissive hand. "Lease, Rob. It's a write-off. Smart business." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Don't worry. Your investment is being put to good use." The confrontations were never direct. They were these little needles. These subtle reminders that he was moving in a world I didn't understand. A world where money was a concept, not a physical thing you earned with calloused hands. Then came the boat. It was a 4th of July barbecue. His place. A rental, but he talked like he owned the whole neighborhood. He'd fired up a grill that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. Everyone was there, friends of theirs I didn't know, sipping expensive imported beer. And down at the dock, bobbing gently in the water, was a 35-foot Formula speedboat. White with blue stripes. Gleaming. It was monstrous. I found him by the grill, flipping burgers he'd never eat. "Nice boat, Chad." He beamed, a king showing off his crown. "Isn't she a beauty? 45,000 pounds of thrust. Can ski all day on a tank of gas." I kept my voice low. "Calm. Must have set you back. That's a pretty big capital expense for a business in its growth phase." His smile didn't falter, but his eyes cooled by about 20 degrees. He leaned in close, the smell of his expensive, citrusy cologne mixing with the smoke from the grill. Rob, you're thinking like a small business owner. This," he gestured with his spatula at the boat, the house, the crowd. "This is networking. This is where deals are made. You think I closed the Anderson account? We did that on the water, with a cooler of beer. You can't put a price on that." It was a masterpiece of deflection. He made my concerns seem small, petty, uninformed. The final straw was Thanksgiving. My house. The smell of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie. The Macy's parade on the TV in the other room. Carol and Sarah were in the kitchen, laughing. I cornered him in the living room, near the fireplace he'd never once helped to stack wood for. "Chad, it's been over 2 years." My voice was a low gravel. The marathon has to have a finish line. He sighed, like I was a tiresome child asking for another cookie. He took a sip of his Pinot Noir. "Rob, I appreciate your concern, I really do. But you have to understand, the market is fluid. We're pivoting. The fitness center was a great learning experience, but the real money is in consultancy. I'm leveraging the brand I built." Leveraging. The word felt like ash in my mouth. "You leveraged my house. I need a timeline. I need something concrete." He set his wineglass down on the mantel, a little too hard. The charm was gone, replaced by a thin veneer of impatience. "The concrete thing is that your investment is safe. It's working. You've just got to stop looking at the ground beneath your feet and look at the horizon. You've got to spend money to make money. You, of all people, should understand that." He picked up his glass and walked away, leaving me standing there by the fire, the heat of it suddenly feeling oppressive. He'd done it again. He'd made me feel foolish for asking, for wanting what was mine. The gap between us wasn't just financial, it was a canyon of different realities. In his, he was a genius building an empire. In mine, I was a retired man with a second mortgage and a son-in-law who thought my life's work was a quaint, outdated concept. The trust was curdling, turning into something sour and heavy in my gut. The handshake under the stars felt 1,000,000 miles away. The doubt was a cold stone in my stomach. It had been sitting there for months, growing heavier with every evasive answer, every new luxury item that appeared while my money stayed gone. I was in my home office, a small room that still smelled of old wood and the faint, sweet scent of my pipe tobacco from years gone by. The hum of the computer fan was the only sound. It was a Tuesday. Rain tapped a steady, miserable rhythm against the window pane. I wasn't a detective. I was a guy who fixed things. When a system is broken, you don't just guess. You run diagnostics. You check the pressure. You look for the leak. My old business partner, Jerry, was my pressure gauge. He'd sold his share of the HVAC business years ago and gone into commercial real estate. He knew that world inside and out. I'd avoided calling him out of pride, out of the sheer embarrassment of having to admit I'd been played for a fool. But the stone in my gut wouldn't let me rest. My finger hovered over his name in my contacts. Finally, I pressed the call. The phone rang twice. "Rob? Hey, stranger! To what do I owe the pleasure? Furnace on the fritz?" His voice was a welcome, familiar rumble. "I wish it was that simple, Jer." I took a deep breath, the air tasting stale. "I need a favor, a quiet one. It's about property." "Shoot." "There's a strip mall out near the Cedar Ridge subdivision, the new one. Anchor unit. You know anything about it? Who owns it? If there's a high-end fitness center moving in?" I could hear him typing, the clack of keys sharp over the line. "Cedar Ridge. Yeah, I know the one. Nice area. The developer is a guy named Miller." "Good guy. Let me pull up the tenant list. It's mostly filled. A physical therapy place, a dentist, a cute little bakery." My heart started to hammer against my ribs. No fitness center? Nope. Not unless they're operating out of the bakery and specializing in pastry lifts. He chuckled at his own joke. Then his tone shifted. The typing stopped. "Why? What's this about, Rob?" The words stuck in my throat. I had to force them out. I loaned Chad a significant amount of money. For a down payment on that anchor unit. For a fitness center. The silence on the other end of the line was heavier than the rain outside. It was a professional silence. A knowing silence. Rob, he never bought any property out here. Not a square foot. Miller wouldn't have sold to a first-timer with no backing anyway. The kid played you. The confirmation should have felt like a punch. Instead, it was like a valve releasing. The cold stone of doubt melted into a hot, liquid rage. He'd lied. It was all a lie. The entire foundation of the last 3 years was rotten. Jerry, I don't know what to say. Say you're gonna lawyer up. Right now. His voice was grim. Do you have anything in writing? Anything at all? A handshake, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. Damn it, Rob, he sighed. Look, I'll email you the tenant list, the owner info. It's something, but you need proof. You need to find a paper trail. We hung up. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the rain-streaked window. The betrayal was a physical ache. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to know. The fitness center was a ghost, a story he'd spun to get his hands on my money. The initial discovery was a sledgehammer, but the midpoint twist was the knife. It came later that night, a slow, sick curiosity driving me to his social media. I never went on the stuff, but I pulled up his profile, my hand trembling slightly on the mouse. There he was, smiling, tanned, his arm around Sarah, pictures from a weekend on the lake. On his boat. The same 45,000 pounds of thrust he'd bragged about. And then I saw it. A post from a month ago. A photo of him, shirtless, holding a bottle of champagne, toasting the camera. He was grinning that same perfect predatory grin. The caption made the blood drain from my face. It made my fingertips go cold and numb. Living the dream, when you're smart enough to use other people's money and never have to pay it back. Hashtag winning, hashtag Noli abilities, hashtag self-made. Hashtag self-made. The word burned into my retina. I read it again and again. The acidic taste of bile rose in the back of my throat. It wasn't just a financial scam. It wasn't just him being bad with money. This was a philosophy. This was his core belief. He saw me not as a father-in-law, not as a partner, but as a mark. A resource to be used and discarded. He was proud of it. He was bragging about it to the world. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. This was who he was. The charming man at the barbecue was the costume. This, the smug, gloating thief on the screen, was the real Chad. He hadn't just taken my money. He'd spat on our relationship, mocked my trust, and called it a win. I printed the page. The printer whirred and spat out the image of his grinning face, those damning words beneath it. I held the still warm paper in my hands. The hum of the computer, the tap of the rain, it all faded into a dull roar in my ears. This wasn't about getting my money back anymore. This was about something else entirely. This was about proving to him that the world didn't work the way he thought it did, that actions had consequences, that hashtag self-made men don't need to steal from their wives, fathers. I had the proof. It wasn't a contract. It was something better. It was his own arrogance printed in black and white. The game had just changed. I didn't call. I didn't schedule a meeting. I showed up. Tuesday morning, 10:17 a.m. I knew his routine. Knew he liked to sleep in, roll into his home office around 10, after making a pot of expensive single-origin coffee. The house was silent except for the low hum of a refrigerator. It smelled of lemony cleaning products and new money. Everything was sleek, cold, and impersonal. A showroom. I walked through the sterile living room, my work boots feeling too heavy on the polished concrete floors, and found him in the kitchen. He was leaning against a massive island of white marble, scrolling through his phone, a half-empty mug of black coffee beside him. He looked up, startled, then quickly arranged his face into that familiar, placating smile. Rob, hey, this is a surprise. He didn't move to shake my hand. Everything okay? Sarah's not here, she's at yoga. "I know," I said, my voice calm, flat. I stopped on the other side of the island. The cold, hard stone felt like a barrier between us. "I came to talk to you." "Sure, sure. Coffee?" He gestured to a high-tech machine that looked like it belonged in a laboratory. "No." I placed the manila folder I was carrying on the marble counter. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. "The Cedar Ridge Strip Mall. The anchor unit. Let's talk about it." His smile tightened at the corners. "Just a fraction." "Oh, that? Yeah, we pivoted, like I said. The market for fitness." I didn't let him finish. I opened the folder. I slid the printed tenant list from Jerry across the counter. "The market for physical therapy and dentists must be booming, since that's who's in that unit, and has been for over a year." His eyes flicked down to the paper. The color drained from his face, leaving a pale, waxy mask. The smile was completely gone now. He looked from the paper to me, his brain scrambling, searching for a new lie, a new deflection. "Where did you get this?" he snapped, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "This is proprietary information. This is just a snapshot." "It's the truth," I said, my voice still low, still steady. "It's the truth you've been avoiding for 2 years. There was never a fitness center. There was never a business. There was just my money, and your boat, and your car." He pushed the paper away as if it were contaminated. "This is insane. You're spying on me now, after everything I've tried to do for this family?" "For this family?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "You mean for yourself?" I slid the second piece of paper out, the social media post. I turned it around so he could see his own grinning face, his own words. "#NoliAbilities. That's a catchy phrase. What does it mean, exactly? That you never intended to pay me back? That I was just a liability you managed to avoid?" That's when the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. His eyes widened, then narrowed into furious slits. All pretense of the charming son-in-law evaporated, replaced by something raw and ugly. His jaw clenched. He snatched the paper off the counter, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it across the room. "You pathetic old man," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "You just couldn't help yourself, could you? Digging through my life. You gave us that money, a father's duty, a gift for taking your daughter off your hands." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. I just watched him. I let him unravel. "There was no contract," he spat, leaning across the island, his finger jabbing the air toward me. "Nothing. You have no proof of anything. Even if you did, the statute of limitations on a handshake is, well, it's a joke. You've got nothing." He straightened up, a smug, triumphant look spreading across his face. He thought he'd won. He thought his bluster was enough. He smoothed down his ridiculously expensive t-shirt. "So you can take your little printouts and your paranoid delusions and get out of my house." He picked up his coffee mug, taking a slow, deliberate sip, his eyes never leaving mine. He was dismissing me. "The answer is no. We don't owe you a dime. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a boat to wax." There it was, the line, delivered not with shouting, but with a cold, contemptuous finality. It hung in the air between us, in the expensive kitchen he'd bought with my money. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to get louder. I looked at him for a long moment. I looked at the entitled sneer, the utter lack of remorse. I didn't say another word. I slowly gathered my papers, placed them back into the folder, and turned to leave. I stopped at the doorway to the kitchen and looked back. He was still watching me, that smirk plastered on his face, believing he'd put me in my place. "You're right about one thing, Chad," I said, my voice so quiet he had to lean forward slightly to hear it. "It was a handshake deal." I turned and walked out, leaving him standing there. The click of the front door closing behind me was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in 3 years. The confrontation was over. He'd shown me exactly who he was, and he had no idea he'd just given me everything I needed. The game wasn't over. It had just begun. I didn't go home. I drove straight to a place that felt more like home than my own house had in years. My lawyer's office. Ed Brennan. Brennan and Associates. A small, unassuming brick building downtown that smelled of old books, lemon polish, and serious, unflashy competence. Ed was a relic, like me. Mid-60s, a face like a well-worn map, and a tie that was probably older than Chad. He didn't deal in corporate mergers or celebrity divorces. He dealt in wills, property disputes, and contracts, the bedrock of society. He listened, steepling his fingers as I laid it all out. The handshake, the missing money, the BMW, the boat. I slid the folder across his massive oak desk. He read Jerry's tenant list, his expression neutral. Then he picked up the crumpled, now smoothed-out printout of Chad's social media post. He read the caption aloud, his voice a dry, dusty rasp. "Use other people's money and never have to pay it back." He looked up at me over his reading glasses. Charming fellow. "He said there's no contract," I said, the memory of Chad's sneer making my knuckles white. "Said handshake is a joke." Ed gave a slow, deliberate blink. "Oral contracts are enforceable, Rob. They're just harder to prove. It becomes a he said scenario. We need evidence of the terms, a written record, an acknowledgement." He tapped the social media post. "This is good. It shows intent to defraud. But it doesn't outline the terms of the agreement itself." The cold stone of doubt started to come back. Maybe Chad was right. Maybe I was a pathetic old man on a fool's errand. Ed must have seen it on my face. "Did you ever follow up? An email? A text? Anything after the fact that might have mentioned the amount, the repayment plan?" I closed my eyes, trying to think back through the fog of anger and regret. The barbecue, the handshake, the feeling of pride. I'd gone to bed that night feeling like a king. The next day, my eyes snapped open. "The next day," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "I was at the shop. I got an email from Chad. I'd forgotten all about it." Ed leaned forward, his chair creaking. "What did it say?" "It was a thank you. What did he call it? A memorandum of our understanding." I thought it was just him being professional, showing initiative. The memory was hazy, buried under 3 years of lies. I think I read it once and filed it away. I didn't think I needed it. We'd shaken on it. Ed's expression didn't change, but a new intensity came into his eyes. "That email, do you still have it?" "My old work email," I said, my heart starting to hammer again. "The shop's server. I retired, but Jerry, he kept the account active for old time's sake, for archives. I never switched to the new system." "Can you access it?" Ed's voice was calm, but there was a current of electricity running beneath it. I think so. The password's written down in my book at home." "Go," Ed said, pointing a finger at the door. "Go now, find it, print it. If it says what I think it might say, we don't have a, he said, we have a contract." I drove home like a man possessed. I fumbled with my keys at the door, my hands shaking. I went straight to my dusty old roll-top desk in the den and found the password book. I fired up my ancient desktop computer, the fan whirring like it was about to take flight. It took forever to load. I navigated to the webmail login for Thompson Heating and Cooling, typed in my username, the password. The inbox loaded. Thousands of old service invoices, parts orders. I typed Chad into the search bar. There it was, sent, July 12th, 3 years ago, 9:04 a.m. The subject line, follow-up and formal thanks. I clicked it. The email was perfectly formatted, professional. "Mr. Thompson, Rob, I wanted to formally thank you again for your incredible generosity last night. Sarah and I are overwhelmed by your belief in us and in our future. This email is to memorialize the terms of our agreement, as we discussed. You are providing a loan in the amount of $150,000 to be used as the down payment for the commercial lease at the Cedar Ridge Strip Mall, Anchor Unit B, for the purpose of establishing peak performance fitness. The terms of repayment are as follows. Interest-only payments for the first 18 months, after which the full principal will be repaid in a lump sum. The interest rate will be 5%, simple interest, per annum. This is a thrilling venture, and I am honored to have you as a partner. I will make you proud. Best. Chad. I read it 3 times, every word, every digit, The amount, the address, the terms, the interest rate, it was all there. In writing, from him. I printed it. The printer groaned and spat out the single, pristine page. I held it. It felt heavier than the social media post. This wasn't just evidence of his character. This was evidence of the deal. I was back in Ed's office within the hour. I handed him the paper. He read it. A slow, deep smile spread across his weathered face. It was the first time I'd ever seen Ed Brennan look truly happy. "Well," he said, placing the paper down gently on his desk, aligning it perfectly with the others. "I'd say that changes the conversation considerably." He picked up his pen. "We're going to file a lawsuit. Tomorrow. We'll include this email as Exhibit A. We'll ask for the principal, the accrued interest, and legal fees, and we'll immediately file a lien against any major assets in his name, starting with that boat." The paperwork was a blur. I signed where he told me to sign. My signature felt strong, sure. "What if he doesn't show up to court?" I asked. Ed smiled that thin, dangerous smile again. "Given his apparent approach to liabilities, I'd say that's the most likely outcome. And if he doesn't show, we win by default. The judgment is automatic. The lien becomes enforceable." 2 weeks later, Ed called me. His voice was dry as dust. The court date was today. Defendant failed to appear. Judgment granted. Full amount, plus interest, plus fees. The lien is active. It's on his car, his boat, everything. I was silent, taking it in. "The ball is in his court now, Rob," Ed said. "He can try to appeal, but with this evidence, he'd be laughed out of court. Or he can ignore it, and if he ignores it..." I could almost hear Ed's shrug over the phone. "Well, then we send the boys with the winch." I hung up the phone. I looked out my window at the quiet street. The execution was complete. The plan had worked perfectly. The law, the system Chad had laughed at, had moved with silent, crushing efficiency. All that was left was to wait. I didn't have to wait long. The phone rang. It was late. The digital clock on my bedside table glowed 11:18 p.m. in harsh red numbers. The house was silent, still buzzing from the adrenaline of the morning. Carol was asleep beside me, her breathing deep and steady. I told her everything after I got home. She just held my hand, her grip tight, and said, "He hurt our girl, Rob. He hurt her too." There was no triumph in her voice, only a deep, weary sadness. The phone kept ringing. I knew who it was before I even picked it up. I'd been expecting this call. I'd played it out in my head a dozen times. I expected the screaming, the threats, the venom. I slid out of bed, padded into the hallway, and answered on the last ring before it went to voicemail. "Hello." What came through the receiver wasn't rage. It was a sound I'd never heard before, a broken, wet, shuddering gasp. It was followed by a silence so profound I could hear the faint static of the line. Then, a voice I barely recognized. "Daddy." It was Sarah. The word was a child's plea, shattered into a million pieces. She hadn't called me that since she was 10. "Sarah, honey, what's wrong?" My own voice was a hoarse whisper. I leaned against the cool wall of the hallway, my knees suddenly weak. Another ragged intake of breath. She was crying. Not the elegant tears of a movie, but the ugly, gut-wrenching sobs of someone whose world has just vaporized. The boat. They took the boat. "I know," I said softly, the words feeling inadequate. "He came home. He was screaming, throwing things." Her words tumbled out, fragmented, blurred by tears. I'd never seen him like that, like an animal. I was so scared. I hid in the bathroom. I closed my eyes, seeing it. The beautiful, sterile house is now a war zone. My little girl, locked in a bathroom, listening to the man she loved, disintegrate. He kept yelling about you, about a lawsuit, about an email. "Daddy, what did you do?" The question wasn't an accusation. It was a desperate search for solid ground in an earthquake. "Sarah, listen to me. I need you to listen." I kept my voice low, calm, the way I did when she'd had a nightmare as a child. "I loaned him money, a lot of money, for a business. He promised to pay it back. He didn't. He spent it on on all of it. The car, the boat. I found out there never was a business. He lied to me. He lied to you." The silence on the other end was heavier than any crying. I could almost feel her brain trying to rewire itself, to process this new, horrible reality. "He said it was a gift," she whispered, her voice tiny. "He told me you gave it to us. For our future. He said you were pressuring him because you were jealous of his success." The moral twist hit me then, not as an idea, but as a physical sickness. It rolled through my gut, cold and greasy. My revenge had been perfect. It had been legal. It had been precise. It had been satisfying. But I had been so focused on the target, on Chad's arrogance, that I hadn't considered the shrapnel. "He lied, baby," I said, the words thick in my throat. I have an email from him, outlining it all, calling it a loan. I sued him because he wouldn't answer me. He didn't even show up to court. "He didn't show up," she repeated, dully. It was all clicking into place for her. The evasions, the sudden wealth, his anger whenever I asked. The foundation of her life for the past 3 years was made of sand, and my lawsuit was the tide that washed it all away. "It's all gone," she sobbed, the crying starting again, but quieter now. Defeated. "It's all a lie. Everything. The business. His friends. It was all just pretend. He's in so much debt, Daddy. So much. It's not just you. It's credit cards. Lines of credit. He used my name on some of it." The sickness in my gut intensified. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd mortgaged my daughter's future. He'd tied her to his sinking ship. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," I whispered. And I was. I was sorry for the pain she was in. I was sorry that my victory felt so hollow, so stained. "Where is he now?" "He packed a bag," she said, her voice empty. "He said he was going to a hotel. He said he couldn't deal with this hysterical nonsense. He said I was being dramatic." I heard a door click shut in the background on her end. The sound of her being alone. "I'm coming to get you," I said, already turning to go back into the bedroom to get dressed. "Right now. You shouldn't be there alone." "No." Her voice was firmer now, a spark of the daughter I knew. "No, I need to be here. I need to, I don't know, pack my own things. Think." "Sarah, I'm not a little girl anymore, Dad." She took a shaky breath. "You were right. About everything. I see that now. I need a minute. To breathe." The line went quiet again. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in her expensive, empty kitchen. I could picture her sitting on the cold floor, surrounded by the broken pieces of the life she thought she had. "I love you, Daddy," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I love you too, honey. More than anything." My eyes were stinging. "I'll be here whenever you're ready. Call me if you need me, anytime." We hung up. I stood in the dark hallway for a long time, the phone still in my hand. The image of the boat being hauled away, which had felt so triumphant just hours before, was now replaced by the image of my daughter's tear-streaked face. I had gotten my revenge. I had exposed the truth. I had won. So why did it feel like I'd just burned down the forest to kill one snake? I had wanted to destroy Chad's false reality. I hadn't considered that my daughter was living inside it too. The cost of victory was her heartbreak. The fallout was silence, and it was deafening. The money from the boat's auction came through. A certified check, delivered by a courier to Ed Brennan's office. It was a thick, official-looking envelope. Ed called me down to sign for it. I sat in the same leather chair, across from the same oak desk. The smell of lemon polish and old paper was a comfort now. A constant in a world that had been turned upside down. "It covered the principal," Ed said, sliding the check across the desk. It was a number with a lot of zeros. "And a good chunk of the interest. You won't get all of it back. The legal fees and what's left on the interest, consider the cost of doing business with a snake." I picked up the check. The paper was crisp. It should have felt like a trophy, a victory flag. It just felt like paper. I folded it once and put it in the breast pocket of my jacket. It lay over my heart, a heavy, insignificant thing. "And Chad?" I asked. Ed took off his glasses and polished them with a cloth. Gone. Moved to a one-bedroom apartment across town. His credit is obliterated. The bank took the BMW last week. He's a ghost. A very, very broken ghost. I nodded. There was no satisfaction in it, just a hollow finality. I didn't go home. I drove to my workshop. The real one. Behind my house. It's a place that doesn't smell like lemon polish or new money. It smells of sawdust, motor oil, and honest sweat. The tools on the wall hung in neat, familiar rows. The project, an old Adirondack chair I was restoring, sat on sawhorses, waiting. I picked up a piece of sandpaper and ran my thumb over its grit. I started working on the arm of the chair. The rhythmic, scraping sound was a meditation. Back and forth. Back and forth. This was the reset. Not a party. Not a celebration. It was the quiet, methodical process of smoothing out what was rough, of making something broken useful again. The side door of the workshop creaked open. A sliver of afternoon light cut across the dusty floor. Sarah stood there, silhouetted. She was holding 2 cups of coffee from the place down the street. "Hey," she said, her voice soft. "Hey, yourself." I put the sandpaper down. She walked in, handed me a cup, and looked around the shop like she was seeing it for the first time. She ran a hand over the smooth wood of the chair. "This is nice." "It's getting there." I took a sip of the coffee. It was hot and bitter. Perfect. She leaned against the workbench, not saying anything for a while. Just drinking her coffee, listening to the quiet. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore. It was just silence, a shared space. "I'm staying with Mom and me for a while," she said finally, "until I figure things out." "Good," I said. "Your old room is ready." "The divorce papers are filed," she added, her voice barely a whisper. "He didn't even fight it." I just nodded. There was nothing to say to that. She looked at me, her eyes clear now, though shadowed with a sadness that would take a long time to fade. "You were right, Dad, about everything." I shook my head. I wasn't right about how to handle it. I was so focused on being right, on getting justice, that I didn't see the fallout. I didn't see you standing in the middle of it. For that, I am so sorry, Sarah. A small, fragile smile touched her lips. You opened my eyes. Even if it hurt, you showed me the truth. That's what a father is supposed to do. She set her coffee down and walked over to me, wrapping her arms around my waist and resting her head on my shoulder. I held her, my girl, my chin resting on her head. We stood like that for a long time, in the quiet sanctuary of the workshop, surrounded by the ghosts of things made and repaired. I got my revenge. But it didn't taste like I thought it would. It didn't taste sweet. It tasted like sawdust and bitter coffee and my daughter's tears. It tasted like a lesson. A costly one. The money in my pocket didn't matter. The boat was gone. The car was gone. Chad was gone. What mattered was the weight of my daughter's head on my shoulder. What mattered was the peace of this workshop. What mattered was the truth, finally, standing clean and honest between us. Protect your peace, folks. Sometimes that's the only revenge you need. If you found a little bit of that peace in this story, if it's made you think about the lines you won't cross and the things you will protect, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring that notification bell. Because we've got more stories like this coming. Stories about justice, about consequences, and about finding your way back to solid ground. Thanks for watching.